In the Business Tonight studio in Johannesburg is Bruce Main from IV Asset Management. With me here is Chris Logan from Opportune Investments. Let's start off with that HCI story. It's quite extraordinary. It's like a soap opera. It's like Dallas, they've won, I've lost. I spoke to somebody today, Chris Logan, welcome by the way, who's an insider there, and he said that the mood around ETV, for example, is very despondent. People wandering around saying, have I still got a job? Productivity has plunged. Just go back a bit. Where did this start?
Well, this started about a week ago, certainly as far as the public was aware, when HCI put out a SENS release that they'd suspended Marcel on gross misconduct. That was shortly followed up by Marcel launching an urgent application in the Labour Court, which basically presented the story that he wasn't really being suspended because of Ellie's transactions, but because he was standing in the way of media independence being compromised.
Yeah. Do you think there was some sort of vendetta against him from either people higher up than him in the organisation of HCI, or maybe even political influence?
It's hard to say. I think what we can now say conclusively is that the charges which were initially levelled against Marcel, gross misconduct and dishonesty, didn't have real substance.
Yes.
He was clearly guilty of contravening some protocols, but it was acknowledged today that there was no dishonesty. Johnny Copeland acknowledged that.
Chris, Nozipo.
We'll get to the AGM itself, but Nozipo, go for it.
Absolutely. I just want to test some of Theo Botha's propositions that have been put on the table. Chris, what do you think of the way forward? Theo says they need an independent chair of the board, and they need to restructure the board if they're going to make any positive way forward. How do you respond to that?
I think those are constructive suggestions of Theo, but the magic bullet in this situation is to spin out the media assets. In other words, HCI controls the media assets at the moment through Surdell. The media assets need to be spun out, so HCI no longer has control of those assets. And that would create the situation where a specialist media company would be listed in its own right without such a dominant shareholder, and there wouldn't be these inherent conflicts or perceptions of conflict. And what would take that matter forward even more would be if Rembrandt then put in their interests in the media interests, which are in Sabido, they're 37%, and there was more broad-spread ownership. So it could dilute SACTU.
Chris, if we look at that, surely what Theo Botha was pushing for is obviously if you get an independent board, you get independent chairman, then surely you will move towards the fact that you shouldn't have meddling or interference in the underlying media assets, because he's already said he doesn't want to allow those assets to be unbundled. Copeland, that is.
Well, sorry, what Johnny said, they were scheduling to unbundle the assets. And then this Marcel situation has put a hold on that. So the plan was to unbundle, and this controversy has put a hold on it. I think what's clear now is from an investment perspective and from an independence perspective, there's even greater reason to unbundle them. And Theo's point here about the independent board, that's key, but have an independent board without such a dominant shareholding, it's going to reinforce the independence.
From an operational point of view, Chris, again, that same insider that I spoke to today, who won't be named, said that he's a visionary, Marcel Golding. I mean, he may have a slightly chaotic management style, but he's a visionary, and he's well liked. I mean, if he does sever all ties with HCI, he's going to come back, isn't he? He's going to do something else. What do you suppose? Give us an idea of the future.
Well, I think Marcel is a media guy. He's very different to Johnny. Johnny's supremely good at structuring strategy. Marcel, to me, he's more arty, he's more media savvy. They're totally different, and they're complementary. But obviously they fell out.
Yeah, it's a shame because, I mean, just quickly on ETV itself as a standalone, is it doing well and will it continue to do well under the stewardship of somebody else?
Well, as you mentioned at the beginning, it's a bit paralyzed at the moment with all these events. I think today there was not just a ceasefire call, there's a truce.
Yes.
So that should allow staff in ETV to start feeling better. The situation's far from ideal, but I think the war's over. There's now a truce. And look, it's key how they take it forward, but at least the shooting stopped.
Chris, thanks so much for coming in this evening.
Thanks a lot.
Chris Logan from Opportune Investments. Naziba, back to you with Tweet Talk. Any tweets about this one?
Absolutely, Lindsay. The Twitterverse has been trending, of course, with the HCI story since it broke. But what we did do today is that we tapped into the reactions after the declaration of the Fed saying that the U.S. economy, as I said earlier, is well enough to leave intensive care with the end of QE. We had a Twitter at Oppenheimer Funds saying the only thing worth noting about the final Q3 taper is that the Fed program worked. But on the other hand, at James Rickard says QE didn't help the economy, ending it won't hurt. We're in structural depression and this will remain. QE only affects asset prices. So different views there and very, very well reflective of the kind of conversations that we've seen on the Twitterverse. Very, very different. But moving on from there, the US Federal Reserve has ended its bond buying program. We'll dig into that as well as the rest of the moving global markets straight after this. What happened to the SO News, the new moving markets? It disappeared. Okay, so we're going to Peter Dixon in London now.
Okay.
Just global markets.
Yeah, it's interesting because you see the reaction, and I suppose the reason why our market was hurt. You saw like the ShopRites, the banks were sort of okay, but it's all commodities,
Yes.
dollar based.
Yes.
So you see the dollar is viewed to be, and especially if the hint is interest rates will start going up,
Yeah.
the carry trade, all of these sort of things start diminishing, and it's going to get ugly.
It's going to get ugly. And then interest rates likely next year, mid next year, some like the
Well,
actual.
The problem is, a stronger dollar